Will Axel Foley mend fences with his daughter?
Are we going to see our fave character Surge make an appearance?
How many dirty cops are under Taggart's command?
Is this movie able to stand on its own if you've never seen the first three installments?
Red and Red Real Reviews takes on another movie and aims to solve whether Beverly Hills Cop Axel F on Netflix is everything from Eddie Murphy's glory days reimagined.
My God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Ahoy, ladies! Didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor with me? I'll be your captain.
I don't think we figure out exactly who we are all at once.
So it learns information about me?
Now, say my name.
Dude, if you think that's bad, go to Google Earth and type in your address.
And I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
Maybe I don't want you to feel like you stand out.
Sometimes you gotta work a little so you can ball a lot.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year.
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of a sheep.
Michael! Oh, that's funny. Michael!
Heisenberg. You're goddamn right.
But it's always a good idea to demonstrate to your coworkers that you are capable of withstanding a tremendous amount of pain.
The Lannisters send their regards.
Been staring at this board for days.
Matt, half the employees in this building have been made up. This office is a goddamn ghost town.
Dracarys.
I had no idea that song is from these movies, by the way.
I had never heard it before, I don't think.
What?
I mean, it did sound vaguely familiar, but I didn't know that it was created, like it was called Axel F. Like it was for this movie. I didn't know it was created for it.
Well, to be fair, that part I didn't realize either. Anyway, welcome back to episode 19 of Red and Red Real Reviews. We are taking on our third feature film review and the second reimagining of an 80s cult classic. Unlike with Roadhouse, where the main actors are still amongst the living, it's a little bit differently for Beverly Hills Cop. The characters are all still cast in this new one, and it's just set some 30 or 40 years after the third movie left off. So before we start getting into our topics, what did you think about that as kind of a premise going in? Like, was that a good way to continue the story?
I mean, I don't know. I know you mentioned that, you know, in the recap that you also confused this franchise with the Police Academy movies, and I'm pretty sure that I did too. I thought that Eddie Murphy was in them for some reason, but yeah, having never watched the first three until now, you know, it's crazy because the third one was 1993. So yeah, it is quite a while after a big gap between the third and fourth one. Yeah, so I mean, I had not seen them at all. I hadn't even seen a portion of one, a clip of one. Like I really knew nothing going into it. So really just watching the first three was background information for me because we were just covering the fourth. So I mean, yeah, we were both kind of jumping into it, you know, way after the fact, after it had its heyday. So I mean, I think yeah, it was an interesting way to keep the story going after such a gap. And I think it kept pretty consistent with the first three. So that was my first kind of impression. It kind of had the same vibe to it, even though it was much, much later.
Yeah, and that we did both jump on the bandwagon very late with this. Kind of similar to what happened with Roadhouse, where you had never
Yes.
seen it, and I saw it a
Mhm.
few years back, but it was just I wasn't really taking it seriously because I knew it was gonna be cheesy going in. So this one was completely catching up on the old movies was completely way behind the times for both of us. And I was expecting it to be a bit more slapstick. And again, it was because I think maybe I was confusing it with either Police Academy, which was very slapstick, or there was then I looked up Police Academy and I realized Eddie Murphy's not even in that movie. So
Right.
what the heck was I thinking of? And
No
what I
idea.
think it might have been maybe even 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. And I don't know if that was a comedy or that was a serious movie. I mean, Beverly
I
Hills
have no
Cop is a
idea.
little bit of both. So I don't know what I was confusing Beverly Hills Cop with.
Yeah, I mean, when the movie opened and it was, it opened in Detroit, it kind of threw me off a little bit. I'm like, it's called Beverly Hills Cop, so why is he working in Detroit?
And it's funny that every single movie, like he keeps going back to Detroit. So every single movie starts, he's in Detroit, he's on his normal beat or whatever. And then he
Right.
winds up heading out to Beverly Hills. So he's like
But it's like,
the Beverly Hills transplanted cop.
but yeah, it's like, but what are the odds of that? Like, is that a thing that they do in real life? They'll have just they'll be, say to a cop from another different state, oh, you'd be really good working this case. Can you come out here and help us? Like, is that a common thing? I don't think so.
Well, to that point, I don't think in any movie he was supposed to be working a case in Beverly Hills.
Well, yeah, I mean,
He's following his buddy's murder, he's following his boss's murder.
Unofficially, true.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. But it's like also, how is he getting all this time off? Or does each movie take place like in 48 hours, like a couple days? Like, or is he taking 3 weeks off to go to Beverly Hills each time? I don't know.
Well, now at least on at least in the first one, he was put on leave.
Right.
So he said, here, go on vacation. He's like, but if you work this case, and of course, Axel's not going to listen to a damn thing his boss says ever.
Yeah.
But the other thing that it took me a minute to get used to is that I really was expecting this to be like a true comedy, and not just because of my own mental mix up with Police Academy, but I thought because of Eddie Murphy's background as a stand-up comedian, I was really expecting a lot of that cheesy 80s humor. It was more like a little chuckle here and there, but it was more or less generally a serious storyline.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned I was going to be watching these movies to one of my friends, and they kind of said, I was like, have you ever watched Beverly Hills Cop? And she was kind of like, oh yeah, they're kind of hokey. That was kind of her response. And I in hindsight, I kind of have to agree. I mean, not just because of, I mean, I wasn't really expecting like the F word to be used. I wasn't really expecting like the strip club parts with full nudity and everything.
You
like,
saw Roadhouse.
I know, but not that I expected it to be PG or anything, but it was a little bit more in the comedy aspect. It was like a lot more language and like sexual jokes than I anticipated. But, that being said, it was like kind of hokey and corny in a lot of ways. And especially the serious stuff was sometimes very cheesy.
Yeah, and in a different kind of hokey, cheesy way than Roadhouse was.
Yes. And I would especially, I mean, obviously it was all three original ones were hokey to some degree, but the fourth one also, just the stuff with his daughter was kind of very like typical and hokey. We'll kind of
the constant reuse storyline of estranged father-daughter relationship.
Yeah, like it just and just the part at the end too. I mean, we can talk about that later, but it just was very like predictable, or I don't know, it just like it didn't, because it was so hokey, it didn't really have a lot of heart to me. Like
Mhm.
even the parts that were very serious didn't feel like touching at all, oddly enough.
Yeah, and that's I get that's a good setup for our next topic because I feel like a lot of what made the serious parts of the movie not feel so serious, and you could even say this about the previous movies, is the flow of these films. And I mean, maybe it's a hat tip to the people who made the new one, keeping in the same grain as the old ones. But the flow of these films is always like building the story up, building the story up, building the relationships up, even if it's in a kind of cheesy way. And then
Yeah.
they get to the climax of the film and it's over like that. And I'm like, like, oh, here's a raid, bad guy's dead. And then you're like, wait a minute, what time is it? The movie's over?
Yeah, yeah, the pacing was off, I think, for all of the movies. Like you said, it was sort of like a long, drawn out buildup of, action and little, they're trying to put like one-liners in there, like it just was a lot of buildup, and then it was kind of a lazy, like rushed ending in all four of the movies, I thought.
Mhm. Yeah, and I don't like this is the tough part about seeing these films of yesteryear so far after they released, in the
I
sense that
know.
like you kind of miss pop culture talking about them and reacting to them
Right.
as they were happening. Like so you didn't see the crowds rush out to see it because, Eddie Murphy was all the talk of the town in, 80s and the early 90s. You didn't get we don't have the benefit of having that authentic, genuine reaction from
Right. I
society.
Yeah, and I mean, it's different when it's so after the fact. I know this one was a hard one for me to stay focused on, just
Mhm.
any of the four movies. I actually had to watch the one that we're covering, the fourth one, in three parts. I started like falling asleep, and so I had to finish the last, 40 minutes, and I watched like half of it, and then I only made it 10 or 15 minutes before I was starting to fall asleep, and I was like, "Hey, I got to finish this." So I had to break it up in several pieces. Like I found it hard to resist like scrolling on my phone. Like I could not stay focused. Which I mean,
I will say one thing. The first two movies kept me a lot more engaged than the third one and the new one.
yeah, I'll be real honest. I didn't really totally finish the third one. I
The
found it
third one was very cheesy with the
I
theme
found it
park.
very difficult to stay focused with the third one. My head was elsewhere. It was really, I was just like bored at times, which I know is weird to say with sort of an action movie.
Mhm.
Like how could you be bored with car chases, and I don't know. It just for me it didn't, like, I maybe had smiled a couple times. I didn't laugh out loud. It didn't tug on the heartstrings at any point. Like I just felt like I wasn't connecting with it at all.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of depth. Which
Right.
is interesting because with this one as well as the older ones, there's still a lot present in the film as far as focusing on character building. So
Yes.
in this one, you have this little triumvirate where in the old movies, the triumvirate was between Axel, Billy, and Taggart. And this new one, Billy and Taggart are still there, but they're kind of more on the side. And it's with
Mm-hmm.
Axel, this new uh hot cop, Bobby, played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and then of course Axel's daughter Jane. And it felt like, and they spent a lot of the film between the three of them, and there were some parts between the three of them where that were pretty funny, like when they're in the when they're in the when they first meet each other and they kind of have that awkward X type of
Yeah.
meeting each other again. He's like, "Did you two have intercourse?"
Yeah.
So like there were some funny, genuine moments there, but they kind of then rushed through when they met up when they not encountered Chelino and played by Louis Guzman,
Yeah.
flash in the pan cameo by him.
Right.
Through this ridiculous helicopter escape sequence, which I actually thought was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was
and-
funny.
Yeah, and then they rush right through Billy's rescue. And then they're raiding Grant's house. The 3 shots, bang, 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 Grant's dead. So, and then it kind of felt like that all that relationship building between Axel, Bobby, and Jane was just kind of forgotten, and we just kind of had that nostalgic ending with Billy and Taggart.
Yeah, I don't know. What was odd is all of the movies kind of, yes, they focused on the case at hand, right? But they also tried to expose more about the character of Axel. Like, they tried to give a lot of background information about who he was, but I just kind of felt like, even with the thing with his daughter, it just felt like after 4 movies, I still like know little to nothing about this guy. Like, right? Like, isn't that strange?
He's just this fly by the seat of his pants kind of gut instinct guy, and yeah, the depth of the character is not much more past that, other than he sees these two cops at the other opposite end of the country every time, and they're the best of friends.
Right. Like it wasn't like there weren't friendships and there weren't relationships. And, he was it the second or the third one that his chief or captain in Detroit passed away, or
That was the third one.
yeah. So I mean, like he had
the second one. It was the second
he
one.
had a weird relationship with his superior, but there was still like a mutual respect, I think. And there was like, it wasn't like there weren't alliances and there weren't friendships and stuff. It just, everything was very surface level to me. It just, it didn't connect to me. It didn't hit me anywhere. Like I just, it just lacked emotion. It lacked any sort of connection, any of the movies.
Which is fine if you're like rolling on the floor laughing the whole time, but if you're not doing that either, then you don't know where to go. It's like, okay, I'm not being emotionally invested, and I'm not laughing my ass off either.
Yeah, so as far as being invested, you're not totally invested. I mean, like when he's kind of bullshitting someone, you're like, oh, like that's funny. And, I hope he makes it through the situation without them finding out who he is. But it's like, you're not really like rooting for him to do anything important, really.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Axel's typical BS lines, he is a bit of a bullshit artist.
Yeah.
And he's always spinning a tale to help uncover the case. It's not like he's bullshitting to be intentionally
right,
like a pathological liar would do, but he's just setting up a persona to try and move the case along and dig a little deeper. And and of course this is a remake, so we have to talk about some kind of callbacks to the original movies. And there were some times where he's BSing around, and as far as his relationship with Jane, there are a couple instances where his nature as a bullshit artist, she kind of grows with him a little bit, because there's an instance where they're in the impound lot trying to get the camera out of Billy's car, and he's trying to do his thing, spin the tail.
Right.
And she calls him out. I was like, oh, well, this guy's movie's one of your favorites. What do you like about it? And he's sitting there like, you see on his face, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, and they eventually get out of that, of course. He still winds up finding a way to BS his way through that one. But then the The other one, they wind up at a hotel later, and he's having really trouble getting. I think it's when they're trying to get into the back, and when they uncover the grant's really dirty. It's kind of like the eye-opening moment for who this guy is. Kevin Bacon of all people.
Yeah.
And then he's having a little trouble getting by the front desk guy, so Jane comes over and kind of lends him a helping hand.
Yeah.
So, like, I know it's like a character development thing because they've got this estranged relationship they're trying to repair, and I think there was also maybe a subtle tone of maybe her ability to bullshit as well. It's just her background as a lawyer versus something maybe running in the blood, like father, like daughter.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think they were definitely implying that she inherited this bullshitting ability, but also as a lawyer, like, you are a bullshit artist.
Yeah.
You have to be versed at that and be able to sound like you know what you're talking about. There's an improv game called World's Greatest Expert where you have to sound like you are the expert on something, and like you are confident, and you have to be confident about what you're saying so that people believe you. And that's what being a lawyer is all about. So yeah, she's in that trade, but also she's got some of her skills because, he's struggling in one of the scenes, and she kind of jumps in and was like, oh, I saved you back there. I jumped in and I made it more convincing, and, they believed us because of what I did, basically.
The old dog losing some of his tricks, as it were.
Yeah.
So some of the other ones, the initial snowplow chase that, and then the furniture truck driving through the mansion, that kind of, I felt like that was a callback. The moment escapes me from the earlier movies, but there was a garbage truck, I think, in one of the original movies, where they're using that as their escape vehicle to get to the final climax scene because they don't have any other way to get there.
Oh, yeah. So so it was kind of a callback using the different vehicles, I think, that were like atypical, like the snowplow truck and
Not paddy wagons.
Yeah, like in the new one, they make a comment about snowplow. Somebody says, "Are you driving a snowplow?" I don't. It was one of the police friends that was helping him out when he was on the chase or something.
Yeah, the snowplow was when they were leaving the hockey game. So I think when they crashed, or maybe while they were driving, maybe his little cop friend says that.
Yeah, somebody says that, and then I noticed they really used music to evoke the feeling of the first three movies. So that first, I think it's the first scene, just, taking place in Detroit. It was the exact same song as I believe the first movie. I don't know that they repeated it in the second or third.
Oh, I didn't know.
But the Heat is On song, the Heat is On. So I noticed they repeated that song. There was also in the snowplow scene in the new one, that was another repeat song. And I didn't realize it was a Bob Seger song. I forget how that one goes, but that was definitely a repeat song. And then, as you demonstrated in our opening, the recurring Axel F jam, done so beautifully on the synth. Obviously in the first three movies, it's like very 80s sounding. It's just like even more like synthy synth, but
synthy synth.
With this newer one, they made it sound a little bit more modern. And like, I don't know if it's just like the audio quality or it was remastered or some bullshit, but they just had a way of making even like the Heat is On song and the repeat song sound more modern and just sound more crisp and clear. And then there was, I think, at the end of the movie, there was a Lil Nas X song that had a sample of the Axel F song. So like they kind of tried to like zhuzh it up and make it more modern. But I I mean, I watched these movies, like I didn't watch these all in a matter of days. Like I kind of spread them out. So every time I would watch one of these movies, I'd be walking around the house like like it gets in your head. My husband was literally humming it or singing it as like 2 hours ago. Literally 2 hours ago. So yeah, it's been, it just, you can't get it out of your head. And I mean, it was a familiar song to me, but I didn't know it was like written for this movie, because in the closed captioning, I am the captioning queen. It said in the captions, Axel F theme.
Mhm.
So like it was particularly scored or written for these movies.
And if you searched on Spotify, it's listed under that name as well. Which I didn't know either. I had no idea that song was written. I had no idea that song was written for these movies, or even named appropriately so.
Yeah, isn't that insane?
So it almost makes you wonder, it might be worth a little research expedition to see which came first, the chicken or the egg. Like, did they name the song Axel F because the character was named Axel Foley? Or
Yes.
did they name the character Axel Foley because this song pre-existed Axel F?
I'm guessing they wrote it for Eddie Murphy, for this character. They put together, they were like, oh dude, we're gonna have a 6 synth theme. But yeah,
Oh.
yeah. So I mean, that was kind of fun because and I think it had some different variations, didn't it? Even in the older movies, like towards the end, when he was like getting close to like really figuring out the case, there would be like a little more of a serious version of it, like a dramatic version of it.
Yeah, I feel like they definitely did change the tempo though. But to your point about modernizing it, which I definitely noticed, they also kind of brought I feel like they also brought the levels down.
Yeah.
So you didn't like like it took you a second to get it right away. Like when they played in the old movies, it was like it's like the Jaws song, you know?
Yeah, it's like they played it several times. I want to say they played it as many as 5 times per movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was almost like they almost use it as what's the term, a mnemonic device. To
Yeah,
kind
well,
of signal the next storyline moving across.
and
or
it's
something
almost
like that.
like to your point, it was very faint in some parts. So like sometimes it feels subconscious, because then I would be walking around the house and I'd be like, do, and I'm like, oh, was that playing during that last scene? Or like I wouldn't realize that that's what I was singing and that's what was in my head, and like that's what was playing during that certain moment.
We get you the old Pavlov's dog treatment. The other things little quick ones that I noticed, one, he gets into town, he gets in trouble with the local cops, who now are 2 female cops. But that was kind of the same thing. In the first movie, he gets into town, he gets in trouble with Billy and Taggart. And he's always promised to be on the next plane out of town. Of course, he stays around and continues with the case. I thought the hotel scene was interesting, going back to how they used it in the new one as a coalescing between him and Jane. But the hotel scene in the first one, he goes on this racial rant about, oh, you don't want N-words in your hotel, blah 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 blah, and oh sorry sir, no, we'll bump you up to a suite right away.
Right.
Of course, the very lovable Serge, Aqua Folly.
Yeah.
And then a couple at the end, I think, and then a very few nostalgic moments at the end. One of them, Taggart grabbing the shotgun out of the trunk. Billy's drop your weapons. He holds his badge up, which he does in every movie at some point in form or another. And then, of course, the final scene, he hops in the back seat of Billy and Taggart's car and implies that he wants to go to the strip club with them. Although I think I think they say they want to go get a porterhouse, which at that point I'm looking, did they like PC that? So they didn't say let's go to the strip club, or is like are they using porterhouse as a euphemism?
Oh, I don't know. Could be. I mean, you can get a steak at a strip club, so I've heard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just Billy and Taggart returning. I mean, we had the famous faces, so just those famous characters from the first 3 movies returning was just a callback in itself. So Paul Reiser was in the beginning. And then Judge Reinhold, I don't know what he did to his face, but I was like, oh, is Mickey Rourke in this movie? Like, I almost didn't recognize him. Like, I was like, this guy's messed with his face, faux show. And then the name of the actor who plays Taggart is John Ashton. And I actually didn't recognize him at first either, but I was like, man, this guy's got to be like 80 years old. I was struck by how old he looked, but to be fair, he is like, I want to say 15 to 20 years older than Eddie Murphy and Judge Reinhold. So, I mean, that explains that. I guess his character is just meant to be older than them anyway. So,
yeah, and you kind of got that feeling from the first one too. Like he's the experienced cop and he's paired with this young kid on the street in Billy's character.
Right. So that was nice to see those familiar faces in it. And then I was happy to see JGL, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It was sort of we've never really seen him as I mean, I know he was in that Bruce Willis movie that was kind of an action movie, but I mean, I wouldn't really peg him as being in a cop movie. That was a first.
No, he doesn't have the tough guy look.
No,
although there
not
was
at all.
that, what was that one movie called he was in where he was like, he was kind of a scummy character. I can't remember if he was a deadbeat boyfriend or he was a drug dealer.
Wait, did it come out in like 2005 or 6? Because I feel like I know what you're talking about.
Probably. No more recent than maybe 2010 at the latest.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. One quick funny story about Judge Reinhold. I swear to you, I thought this man died.
Really?
Yeah, and I think the only reason I confused them is because I must have mixed him up in my brain with Phil Hartman, because Judge Reinhold, the role in my brain I first saw him in was Tim Allen's ex-wife's new husband in the Santa Claus.
Oh yeah.
And Phil Hartman was Arnold's annoyingly super dad neighbor in Jingle All the Way. So I was getting side characters from iconic childhood Christmas movies of mine mixed up. So I think that's why I thought Judge Reinhold had died at some point, because Phil Hartman died.
I didn't even realize that. I mean, obviously I knew who the name and I knew who Judge Reinhold was, but even now I'm trying to figure out what he's been in and I couldn't think of anything. But you're right about the Santa Claus.
Yeah. That's honestly that's the only other movie I know.
I know I couldn't think of anything on my own. Like I know he's been around, and for some reason I was like, wait, was he in Beethoven? No, that was that other guy.
Oh, who was the actor of Beethoven?
I don't know that guy's name. The guy who plays the father.
Yeah.
Really mean guy. Yeah, for some reason I had it in my head that Judge Reinhold like has played like mean characters before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It wasn't Stephen Collins, so that's not Stephen Collins in Beethoven, is it?
No.
Okay. So as we normally do, we talk about some quotes and we'll pick out some funny ones, since this is, a drama masquerading as a comedy at certain times. So for me, like we said before, it is very comparable to the older movies as far as having a semi-serious storyline and them just kind of sneak little one-liners in. And the one that I found particularly funny was when Bobby and Axel and Billy are in the truck and they're racing to Grant's house, and they're just kind of I guess Billy is just trying to make chit chat with Bobby, and he goes, "Did he take you to the strip club yet?" As a callback to the first film. And Axel probably was, "I'm not taking him to the strip club. He had intercourse with my child." And Billy just goes, "Awkward."
Yeah.
And the other one, I think we both noted this one.
Yeah.
He says to the local cops, and they're having this little chase through downtown Beverly Hills, and he's getting apprehended, which of course he got apprehended in the first movie and taken into the station. And he's like, you know what? And he sees their car. They're driving this little dinky smart car, and he's like, well, I'd rather be get locked up for resisting arrest than ride along in this Fisher Price looking motherfucker.
Yeah, and it was two female cops, wasn't it? And then he
Yeah.
made a comment. So first he said the Fisher Price thing, and in the next breath he said something about you Lego cops, or like,
Yes.
you know, making a reference to just like the toy looking car. These are two females. Like, this is a joke.
Yeah. And then what was the other one I liked? Oh, after Bobby gets suspended, Axel looks at him, he's like, first time? Congratulations. I always do my best work when I'm suspended.
Yeah.
Because that was a couple times with oh shoot, I can't think of his boss's name from the original ones. B.O. the T.
Oh, I can't remember either.
Oh shoot. What was one you wrote down?
So I thought it was funny. I think it was the part with Paul Reiser in the beginning when he tells him he's retiring. So I was laughing when, you know, Axel was joking around like, what, you want to spend time with your grandkids? Like, you don't even like your grandkids. Like, you called one of them a sociopath, and like, this is your grandkid that you're supposed to love dearly. And so that whole conversation was funny. And he's just basically trying to convince him not to retire. He wants to keep him around. And then it was one of the times when Axel was bullshitting somebody to try to, you know, find out information, that he just went into that house and he started acting like he was meant to be there. And the two guys in there were like, wait, you know, who are you? Like, wait, you look like the guy in this picture. And, you know, so he says something about how he's like, oh, that's not me. He's like, you know, it's like, that's Wesley Snipes. And everybody say I look like Wesley Snipes. And which was pretty hilarious, because I'm sure that's like a reference to Eddie Murphy being mistaken for Wesley Snipes all the time, probably, because they're like roughly the same age, like they're both black men, like
came up through cinema around the same time.
Yes, exactly. They were in their heyday, like at the same time. And then you mentioned the doofy real estate agent, who was Nasim Pedrad. Now, she was on SNL very temporarily for a couple years, and she was also Allie from New Girl, who was
that's where I recognized her. I knew I recognized her from something, but I'm like, I recognize this chick, but I don't know who the heck this is.
Yeah, she was pretty funny in that part. There wasn't like one line I wrote down, but everything she was saying she was just like, you know, totally dippy and ditzy.
Oh, I did. She says, oh, your name's Axel, my name's Ashley. Together we'd be actually. And I'm thinking, oh God. That is not the type of one-liner we want.
She was just so like shallow, like total basic bitch. Like, but she was funny. Just she was such a, you know, a dramatic version of the typical basic real estate agent, bougie, you know.
Yeah, it was a different way to use the type of one-liners that the films have kind of made a habit of.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the big question is, of course, it's a remake. So despite the fact that it's not really a remake, because it picks up the same timeline and continues it along. So how did it compare?
I mean, it did seem more woke to me. I feel like it's, you know, aligning with modern times, because the part at the hockey game in the beginning, I kind of rolled my eyes when Axel was, you know, he's with like a guy who's kind of a new cop, it seems like, and a white guy, and he's kind of ragging on him and you know, pretending it's a racial issue when it's not. And you know, the guy is kind of like, oh, well, I would never say that. Or like, I was just kind of rolling my eyes because that part was kind of lame. And it
was particularly lame because Axel was not a particularly woke character in the original movies. Like,
exactly.
He definitely towed the line with some jokes.
Right. He told the line, but it wasn't like what was cringy to me, I think, was the white guy's reaction to stuff, like just afraid of offending or afraid of thinking or like I don't know, that was the cringy part to me. It wasn't necessarily Eddie Murphy's stance in that scene. But yeah, I mean, it did seem a little more woke to me. Like it wasn't that much more woke, but I mean, I think when we were talking about covering this, we kind of agreed that it would be best to watch the older ones so that we knew the callbacks, you know, and but looking at it in hindsight, like I feel like I could have watched this one and been okay. Like, yes, I wouldn't know the callbacks, but I I do think it can stand on its own. I talked to a friend who watched it, like hadn't really seen any of the Beverly Hills Cop movies of the past, like just kind of was looking for something to watch, watched it and enjoyed it, thought it was pretty funny, and like it stood on its own for her. So I was like, you know what? If I had watched it as a standalone, maybe I would have actually enjoyed it more, not having the other three to compare it to. And again, obviously, I wouldn't have understood the little jokes and the things that resurfaced, but yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Obviously, I think it was very consistent, like it was just as hokey and just as like it was consistent in its vibe, right, the whole time through for all four movies, so that it hit on the head. But
yeah, I thought it stood on its own too, because Bobby and Jane are completely brand new characters and they took up a lot of the storyline, as opposed to and the villain in every single movie is always new. The villain is always a new arc. So there was no pickup to call back to that. There's no history there. It wasn't like a Batman Joker thing with Axel Foley. And the characters that return, Taggart, very limited role in this. Billy, very limited role in this. Jeffrey, Paul Reiser, I mean, limited role, but he had a limited role in the other ones too.
Yes.
So, and then Surge, I think Surge was only in like it was only in like the first one and had a little cameo in maybe the third one. So like
he was not in the second one. And I was talking about this with somebody. I think this was the first one was what, 1985 or something like that, 1984 or 5.
I think 4.
And then the second one was 1987. What I think happened is I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name who plays Surge. Bronson Pinchot. I don't know if it's really French. But he was on Perfect Strangers. He was a really big show. He played a character named Balky, who's like from a foreign country. So he had to do like a weird accent. So he's pretty much Surge, like in this show. Like his character is very similar to Surge. And that show was on during that time from the late 80s to the early 90s. So that show was probably in its prime at that point, and he just wasn't available to do an appearance in the second one, probably.
Oh, that would make it's weird how things line up like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like all those kind of characters that we kind of had maybe some nostalgia when we see them again, they really didn't have that big of an impact on the new one much at all. So I think that's kind of reinforces the fact that the new movie can be a standalone film.
Right. Yeah, I think so too.
So of course, to wrap up, we got to do our final thoughts. I mean, remakes are tricky, and I know I use the term loosely, it's not really a remake. Did it pay proper homage? We already addressed if it could have stood on its own. Was the continuation of the story done well? That sort of thing.
I mean, like I said, I didn't finish the third movie. There is a woman in the third movie, correct?
Yeah, and they kind of hinted that maybe she was Jane's mother, because they end the third one with a kind of assumption that she and Axel have somewhat of a relationship, whether whether it's just something on and off or if it's a serious thing. So
But
it's
there's
almost kind of
no,
implied that maybe that's Jane's mother.
but she's but in the third one there's no mention of like her telling him like I'm pregnant by the way, or no indication of him being a father or
no.
going to be a father. Yeah.
No.
So
They don't. You don't see them enact the relationship in the third one. It's just kind of an unspoken, because he asked her out on a date at one point, and of course that gets delayed because of the way the movie goes. But they kind of come back together at the end, and you kind of have this feeling like, okay, they're gonna be together now. I forgot exactly how the way it was done, whether they drove off or they
okay,
kissed
yeah.
or whatever it
So
was.
I mean, it sounds like I didn't miss extremely much, but
Mhm.
I mean, so basically, you know, as far as the continuation of the story, I mean, if you're gonna make a sequel to a movie 30 to 40 years later, I mean, I guess the only logical thing to do is have like the next generation focus on, you know, so that's why I think like I don't want to say it was out of left field because it wasn't really, but it wasn't like it was completely fabricated for him to have a daughter, but yeah, I mean, it just added this whole thing of like, oh, they're estranged and predictable, and you know, it just the last scene at the end where he literally Axel takes the bullet for her. I doesn't she like yell out like daddy or so, it just like just the whole thing was just like, again, it's just like very hokey. It's just like, okay, so you're telling me she's like being completely bitchy to him the whole movie, and then all of a sudden she's like, oh no, my daddy, like what? Like
Yeah, she's all hard. She's like this, like real hard and tough personality type, and then she shrivels up to daddy's little girl.
and then she melts like a popsicle because he took a bullet for her. Like
Yeah.
I just I don't
Yeah.
know.
And now all of a sudden your relationship's completely healed. Forget everything that
Yeah,
happened in the last 30 years.
that's all it took. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't honestly, the best part of the movie, the fourth one, and the best part of this franchise overall is the theme.
Sorry.
That's the
Had
best
to do it
part.
again.
That's the highlight for me. That's what I said to my husband. I said, best part of this movie, that goddamn song. It slaps.
It does. It does. I will. No lies detected. Well, we don't lie, and don't lie to us. If you enjoy listening to our show, very, very much appreciate a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can find us on audio on those platforms, as well as iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, as well as video wise. If you just want to see the sparkling red ginger hair on YouTube and Rumble, find us there. Follow along with us on Instagram and TikTok. You can follow Binge the Ginge. That is dots between the words on Instagram. One word, Binge the Ginge on TikTok. And myself, Nutmeg 2 Palmetto. That is the number 2 on both Instagram and TikTok. For episode 20, for some reason, Netflix has decided to put out the final season of Cobra Kai in not 1, not 2, but 3 parts. The first one coming up in another week or so, a few days from now. The second one around Thanksgiving, so I guess we'll have a Turkey Day show, and the third one next year. We don't know when the heck that's going to come out. So why Netflix is doing that, I don't know. But I guess we get 3 Cobra Kai shows out of this, and the first one will be our next episode. Until that very next real review, Red and Red, signing out.
Are we going to see our fave character Surge make an appointment? Whoa.
What?
I was so focused on the Surge. Is that how they say it? Serge?
Serge.
Is it Serge or like Surge? Do you remember the soda? Surge?
Yes. I thought you might have turned off for the movie. Yes. In real life, yes, I do. From the top.
This is not going well.
Red and Red Real Reviews takes on another movie and aims to solve whether Beverly Hills Cop Axel F on Netflix.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out? What? Do what?
I'd like to be pimps from Oakland or cowboys from Arizona, but it's not Halloween.
Let the dogs out, you know it. Who let the dogs out? Who brought this guy along?
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chump some of this shit.
Grow up, Peter Pan. Count Chocula.
Never, ever marks the spot.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
All right. Then you do us proud. Because I don't want no scrubs.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness. You weren't on any mercy mission.
Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
10. X marks the spot.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up!
Peace! Smile, you son of a...
Toodaloo, motherfucker.
Hey, ain't too proud to beg.
Come on!
What?
It's not funny anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to
TLC references.
Still, nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.